Born in 1951 in or near Boston proper and raised in nearby Natick, Massachusetts, still within the region of Greater Boston, Jonathan Michael Richman was born into a middle-class Jewish family. His father was a travelling salesman who sold groceries to the military. It was through a side hustle, also organising entertainment for the military, that his father was able to procure Jonathan's first guitar for him. He first heard the Velvet Underground and Nico's 1967 debut album at age 16, the moment for him when everything changed. He started singing publicly in 1968, busking made-up songs on the spot to students milling around Boston's Cambridge Common, with his short hair and white plastic motorcycle jacket, entirely out of step with the prevailingly stoned, long-haired, hippie aesthetic then dominating the youth culture. Hippie Johnny. And it was there that he struck upon the work ethic that has propelled him right through to today, which is to say that while he was perfectly aware of his modest talents, his nasal voice, and lack of industry connections, he knew that if he just kept showing up and playing music, listening to music, and otherwise absorbing himself in whatever scene was happening, he would eventually find a way in. Even if everyone thinks that you suck and you're a clean-living, nebbish dork who will never get laid. And if refusing to give up in the face of those challenges is not punk rock, I don't know what is. As a young man, he was both titillated and more than a little bit wary of the primal and dark sounds of the Stooges and the MC5 to the west in Detroit, as well as maintaining a healthy appreciation of early rock and roll, garage rock, doo-wop, and the groups of the ubiquitous British invasion, particularly The Who. But the Velvet Underground, nonetheless, remained Jonathan's firm favourite. And true to form, rather than waiting around for something to happen, he took it upon himself to make something happen, following his muse to New York at age 18, enjoying his very first brush with infamy, orbiting Andy Warhol's wider factory clique, and working as a busboy at the iconic nightclub Max's Kansas City. Of course, this was the year after Warhol was badly wounded in an assassination attempt and had subsequently taken a back seat production-wise. Additionally, the Velvet Underground by that time had already moved on from that scene and had lost founding member and future Modern Lovers producer John Cale. Jonathan did, however, outside of keeping a day job as a runner at Esquire magazine, slept mostly on the couch of the Velvet's manager Steve Sesnick, eventually becoming somewhat ingratiated with the band, including opening for them as a solo act on at least one occasion in Boston. After spending several months living at the low-rent Hotel Albert in Greenwich Village, Jojo split New York for a trip across the Atlantic to wander the old world of Europe and made a rite of passage visit to Israel as well before returning to his native Boston. There he almost immediately formed the first incarnation of the Modern Lovers, performing a handful of songs with mostly improvised lyrics that would eventually end up on the album The Modern Lovers. Jonathan's friendship with the legendary music publicist Danny Fields, then a Warhol Factory outsider but a Detroit proto-punk scene insider, led to bassist Ernie Brooks and Jerry Harrison joining the band and cemented the Modern Lovers' classic lineup in 1971. On building up a considerable local following in Boston and off the back of a personal endorsement from influential New York-based Australian music journalist and best friend of Linda McCartney, Lillian Roxon, the Modern Lovers became the subject of a record label bidding war. While at least 4, if not 5 labels had sent bigwigs along to their gigs, it was on the company dime of Warner Brothers that they recorded their first demo in Boston, then flown over to California in April 1972 for their first major label demo session with former Velvet John Cale, with a third on the same trip financed by A&M Records with producers Alan Mason and Robert Appert. These sessions became the source material for their classic album, The Modern Lovers, the subject of this video, 4 years later. But a hell of a lot more happened before it ever saw the light of day. For one, the band's introduction to LA and their first brush with the big-time music industry immediately spooked the band, Jonathan especially, being the young man of principle that he was. And some of LA's dark energy unfortunately followed them back to the East Coast. Desperately poor, the Modern Lovers rented a house in Cohasset, another Boston satellite town, this time on the coast. Their return to the routine of rehearsing and gigging around the Boston area was interrupted in November 1972 when Miss Christine, a key member of the LA groupie collective Girls Together Outrageously, GTOs, who was also Frank Zappa's nanny and allegedly the inspiration for the Flying Burrito Brothers' scathing debut album opener Christine's Tune, died of a prescription pill overdose at the age of 23 in the house rented by the Modern Lovers, the day after having arrived in Cohasset. While the incident has rarely been discussed by Jonathan or the other members of the band, it no doubt added to their suspicion of the rock world and the darkness that came with it. Music industry vultures continued to sniff around the group, with the band entering seemingly endless negotiations with labels and managers, and they landed support slots with the New York Dolls and the then ascending fellow Bostonians Aerosmith, as well as, bizarrely, taking up the offer of a gig in the British overseas territory of Bermuda in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. On their return to LA for more recording sessions with John Cale in the autumn of 1973, Phil Kaufman, the band's Warner Brothers handler, introduced them to Graham Parsons and Emmylou Harris, with the band living at the latter's LA home for a portion of their stay. Jonathan himself apparently played mini-golf with Graham Parsons the day before he overdosed in Joshua Tree, after which you had the famous story of Phil Kaufman stealing and then burning his body in the desert. The Modern Lovers even played at his wake, at Kaufman's request. There are photos floating around online of this event, and if the whole affair is baffling to us now, it must have been an absolute mind-bender for the band at the time. This of course only added to Jonathan's uneasiness with the rock scene. To quote Ernie Brooks, LA, that's where the problem started, almost immediately. I think it was because Jonathan had been changing. I don't think that it was so much that he was getting tired of the old songs as he was developing this idea that the whole rock and roll star-making machinery was corrupt. And part of that was the whole system of burning fossil fuels to generate electricity, using a lot of power for amps and sound systems, playing stadiums. Feeling that there was something wrong in profiting from all these things. And he started tying it all together in his mind and decided that he didn't want the Modern Lovers to be a conventional rock and roll band. As a result, Jonathan fell out with his hero, producer John Cale, who was pushing for the more hard-driving punk angst of their earlier demo sessions. Finding himself drawn to the laid-back style of the local musicians he met during the band's Bermuda stay, Jonathan then fell out with the rest of the Modern Lovers for good measure on their return to Massachusetts. Scared and scarred by the brutal modern world of rock music and the business around it, even before it was publicly released, Jonathan was refusing to play the band's crowd-pleasing favourite Roadrunner and was nonplussed when the Modern Lovers were unceremoniously dropped by Warner Brothers, marking the end of the Modern Lovers Mark I. As David Robinson says, Jonathan was obsessed and we couldn't talk him out of it. He wanted to play acoustic on street corners and at rest homes. And I was supposed to play a rolled-up newspaper by banging my fists against it. I was the first to leave. Following the band's breakup in 1974, drummer Robinson went on to become a founding member of the Cars. Keyboardist Jerry Harrison went back to school to study architecture before eventually joining the Talking Heads. And bassist Ernie Brooks moved back to Boston and became a sought-after session musician. In the 2 years between the Modern Lovers' demise and the eventual release of their eponymous album, Jonathan continued to write and perform as a solo artist, moving ever further away from the modern world of rock music in favour of the comforting and warm nostalgia of 50s doo-wop and early rock and roll that first inspired him. He even briefly played drums in Patti Smith's backing band, incredibly enough. So while the Modern Lovers finally came out in August 1976 to critical acclaim, Jonathan had very little oversight of its release, and in fact had released what he, to this day, truly considers his debut album, the confusingly titled Jonathan Richman and the Modern Lovers, also on Berserkly Records. This was also the name of the new version of the band, which included none of the original members from the first incarnation of the group. And strategic blunders aside, it's musically miles away from the songs recorded earlier in the decade, with far more emphasis on low volume, jaunty 50s style rock and roll, and what could, in all fairness, be described as children's songs, including such titles as Abominable Snowman, In the Market, Hey There Little Insect, and Here Come the Martians, Martians. And it's great. In the best possible way, we got more of the same with rock and roll with the Modern Lovers in 1977 and Back in Your Life in 1979, the former spawning the Jonathan staple and cover, Egyptian reggae, and the latter leaning ever further into the world of children's music. On that note, I think it's a great shame that Jonathan Richman hasn't become a household name as a children's entertainer, as he clearly has the disposition for it. I've often wondered why more people don't merge into that genre, as there's clearly a huge market there. Additionally, with someone like Jonathan, it doesn't really matter if it's deliberate or not, because even his serious songs, with a small number of exceptions, mostly on the Modern Lovers, are at the very least childlike, if not explicitly for children. Anyway, he toured ever-changing lineups of the band over the next decade as well as solo, releasing several more perfectly fun, cheap and cheerful records, including Jonathan Sings in 1983, Rocking and Romance in 1985, featuring one of my personal favourite JoJo tracks, Vincent van Gogh, and It's Time for Jonathan Richman and the Modern Lovers in 1986. And if you'd like a good taste of this period of Jonathan, I recommend looking up a video on YouTube of him playing at a venue called the Old Palms Playhouse from 1985. He's performing with his own version of a power trio, just playing saxophone, accompanied by an acoustic guitarist and stand-up drummer. And despite it not being a particularly big room and most of the audience are sitting down, it's frankly the gig that if I had a time machine, I would honestly go back to be at. It's just so joyous. I might add as well that at 34, Jonathan is no longer a gawky teenager. He's grown into a beautiful, beautiful man. Anyway, he retired the Modern Lovers with Modern Lovers 88, an album many, at least retrospectively, if not at the time, consider a major return to form for JoJo. After permanently disbanding the Modern Lovers, he has since released at least 18 solo albums. I, of course, won't go through all of them, nor have I heard them all. But some favourites include his self-titled 1989 solo debut, which is fantastic, including the classics Everyday Clothes, Fender Stratocaster, and the spoken word, I Eat With Gusto, Damn You Bet. 1991's I, Jonathan, is probably his best known, most highly regarded solo album, with very good reason. Every single track is a banger, and I am leaving the door open to doing a video on it, considering how much of his career I have had to brush over here. In short, this is the gateway drug to solo Jonathan for those curious. 1996's surrender to Jonathan was quite literally my JoJo gateway drug. I didn't know at the time it coincided with the breakup of his first marriage, and as a result there is a hint of mature sadness that has increasingly characterized his later output. All of this time he has continued touring, these days usually just with a drummer for accompaniment, and playing a nylon string classical guitar and preferring super low volumes wherever possible. He also paints and makes pizza ovens on the side. Can you believe this guy? If you liked this video, please do me a favor and hit the like button, but if you didn't, rather than hit the dislike button, can I suggest you leave a comment and let me know why? I'm always open to feedback, advice, and opinions that challenge mine. Plus, it apparently helps me game YouTube's algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it will let you know whenever I put something new up. You can follow me on all the socials if you're so inclined. And if you'd like to incentivize me with a $5 a month to continue doing these videos, a link to my Patreon should be just beneath this video. Cheers.